Okay, guys, what's up? This video I'm going to be talking about my thoughts and opinions on Mark Henry's push, for the world title, just the latest push that he's been getting over the past, 4 or 5 months in WWE. So, yeah, for all you guys that know, Mark Henry will be facing Randy Orton for the World Heavyweight title. It's this Sunday's Night of Champions pay-per-view from WWE. And a lot of people just really cringe at the fact that, Mark Henry is getting this world title shot, and if not possibly becoming, the next world champion. A lot of people, like I said, just really cringe and just turn sour towards this. And honestly, I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea. And here's why I think it's not that. I don't cringe when I think Mark Henry world champion or Mark Henry in a main event spot. It's because you gotta say it like this. One, okay, like I know a lot of people consider the only reason why Mark Henry's getting this push is because he's a veteran. He's been there for X number of years, 15, 16 years or whatever. And so WWE created feel like, oh, well, since you've been here, for so many years, to say thank you, here's a world title. And that might as well possibly be maybe the reason why. But the reason why I really don't cringe when I think of Mark Henry getting this push is because, okay, yes, this isn't Mark Henry's first push, up monster heel push. He's had these big, pushes where, where he's just been like, an unstoppable monster or whatever. But I think what sets this one different from all the others is that it actually means something compared to in times past. Yeah, Mark Henry's had all these huge monster pushes before in times past, but WWE hasn't really gone anywhere with it. They just like, this is as far as you get with it, like that. But they're actually taking this monster push that he has, and they're actually taking it somewhere, and they're taking it further up, and they're kicking it up a notch with it. Secondly, like I said, if you look at any of the talent on the SmackDown roster, or even on the Raw roster, Mark Henry is probably the only most believable heel currently right now on the WWE, especially on the SmackDown roster. Let's be honest here, guys. Let's tell the truth here, and let's be honest. Okay, yeah, Mark Henry has a world title match against Randy Orton. A lot of people say, oh, Randy Orton, ooh, against Mark Henry. No, not Mark Henry against Randy Orton. But here's the thing. You look at any of the talent on the WWE roster, well, not WWE roster, but on the SmackDown roster, on the SmackDown show, all those guys are still very young. They haven't found their niche yet as to, who they are and what they want to do and what they want to be, as a character or whatever in wrestling. So a lot of the talent on the SmackDown roster are underdeveloped. So it's like they really didn't have much of a choice but to use Mark Henry. Because if you just plug in any random, young guy on the SmackDown roster and you put him up in a world title match against Randy Orton, automatically you're going to think, oh, it's very predictable. Oh, Randy Orton's going to win. Hands down, he's got this. He's going to win this here. You could put Cody Rhodes in a world title match against Randy Orton. Yes, Cody beat Randy this past Monday on Raw, but only due to interference. But anyway, still, okay, you could put Cody Rhodes. Okay, you could put Ted DiBiase. But still, going into that match, there's no way in blue hell are you actually going to think that Cody Rhodes or DiBiase can beat Randy Orton for the World Heavyweight title. And like I said before, yes, Cody did beat Randy this past Monday on Raw, but only due to a distraction. But still, if it was a pay-per-view match, no distractions or anything, there's no way in blue hell do you think Cody Rhodes is going to beat Randy Orton for the World Heavyweight Championship. Not going to happen. Why? Because, the position that Randy Orton's in, Randy Orton doesn't lay down that much for anybody for them to get over on him. So, like I said, the lack of talent on the SmackDown roster. Second thing, people are like, I definitely don't know. People don't want to see another Randy Orton Christian match because they complained about that, when they fought the last 2 or 3 times. Okay, yeah, Christian and Randy Orton, they've had a fantastic rivalry. They've had solid matches over the last 5 or 6 months. Each match just as good as the next. Well, actually, the best match was probably Over the Limit pay-per-view. That's the one that tops it all. If not, I'd probably put the match at SummerSlam close to being better than the one Over Limit. But still, Orton and Christian have great chemistry in the ring. They've had great matches. But let's be honest, you people. Do the rest of you guys want to see another a Christian Randy Orton match throughout the rest of the year? And some of you may say, well, I prefer that over a Mark Henry match. But still, you're going to get those people out there that are going to complain, oh, another Christian match, versus Randy Orton. They've already fought each other like 8 times, during the beginning of the year or middle of the year. Why the hell are they fighting again? So you can't keep plugging a Christian Randy Orton match because WWE ran that to the ground. Okay? So then you can say, okay, well, what about Sheamus? Okay, yeah, Sheamus is a former 2-time WWE champion. You could put Sheamus in there, but here's the thing. Randy Orton is a babyface. Sheamus is just now turned into a babyface and is getting a really good push for it. You could put Sheamus in with Randy Orton as a title match. That is another alternative, but here's the thing. Very rarely in any wrestling company, whether it was WCW, ECW, WWE, the scenario happens occasionally, but it doesn't happen often, where you have a babyface versus a babyface for a world title, or even a heel versus another heel, for a world title. That's very, very rare. It happens on certain occasions. Not often will you have a babyface versus another babyface for a title. It's always babyface heel, never two of the same thing. So you can scratch Sheamus out. So if you scratch Sheamus out, because like I said, you don't have, it's very, it's not that common to have face versus face. So you scratch Sheamus out, scratch Christian out because no one wants to continue to see a Christian Randy Orton match. Like I said, they've had great matches during this year for the last 5 months, but people complained when their rivalry lasted that long. So can't keep plugging that in. So you scratch Christian out, and then you take the rest of the SmackDown roster. Like I said, if you look at them, not very developed. Okay, yeah, you can put in a Wade Barrett or you can put in a Cody Rhodes, but it's still going to be predictable. And you're going to say there's no way in blue hell can these guys beat Randy Orton for the championship. So automatically you can scratch out all the young guys out on the roster. So then you just have your one choice, and that's Mark Henry. So if you really look at that, if you look at it this way, they really don't have much of a choice but to use Mark Henry. And like I said, yes, it could be one of those things, where, like I said, we know they feel like, okay, well, yeah, you've been a veteran, you worked in a company for X number of years, so here's a reward unto you. But like I said, I don't think this is necessarily bad for Mark Henry because, like I said, I think this has been a good push for Mark Henry. And yes, this isn't Mark Henry's first monstrous push because he's had so many back in times past. But like I said earlier in my video here, that those past pushes never really got him anywhere. This push actually means something because it's taking him straight up to the top to be the world champion. And if you look at Mark Henry, like I said, the stuff that he's done from Big Show, Sheamus, Kane, just working his way up, Mark Henry has been a very destructive and a believable heel. Believable. That's the key thing, and that's something that a lot of the young talent lack is believability. Whether it's on the mic, whether it's their character, they lack believability. Mark Henry, because of the veteran that he is, and he does come from that era, with the Rocks and the Austins and the Shawn Michaels and the Triple H's and so forth, where he knows how to be believable, and I think he has been believable. And if you look at the last 2 or 3 weeks from Raw this Monday and the last 2 weeks on SmackDown, he's just been beating the hell out of Randy Orton. So him beating the hell out of Randy Orton, like I said, is just his monstrous build leading up to this point. He's actually become a legitimate threat to Randy Orton and the title. Because going into this pay-per-view, okay, yeah, Randy Orton, he may win. He may, do a cheap shot. He may hit him across the head when the referee's not looking. He may somehow, beat Mark Henry. But let's be honest, anybody going into this pay-per-view may want Randy to win, but the first thing that comes to your mind is like, if you've seen how Mark Henry's been beating up Randy for the past 2 or 3 weeks, the first thing that comes to your mind is, there's no way in hell can Randy Orton, Randy Orton's going to get this. You may want Randy to get it. You may say, okay, yeah, I want Randy Orton to win, but there's no way that he's going to win because, you know, they're going to give it to Mark Henry. Like I said, a legitimate threat. Like me watching this whole thing that's been going on SmackDown for Mark Henry, I can't say if Randy Orton's going to, come out as the world champion. Mark Henry just might. Now, I don't think he will win at Night of Champions. Simply the fact that the Vengeance pay-per-view, which is in October, has Mark Henry on the front cover. It's the poster. The poster for the Vengeance pay-per-view in October has Mark Henry on it. So that gets me to believe that Henry would win the world championship at the Vengeance pay-per-view. But however it may be, he may still win it at Night of Champions. I don't know. I'm not guaranteeing anything. I'm just giving my opinions as to why I don't think he may win it at Night of Champions. But however, Mark Henry, like I said, has been believable, and like I said, the only person Randy Orton has been defending his title against is Christian. And each time he fights Christian, like I said, they've had great matches. But you look at Christian and you look at Randy, it's like there's no way Christian can get over Randy, at least clean, at least without doing something cheap and cheesy like he did at Money in the Bank. So, you have Mark Henry with this huge monstrous push. Like I said, I think it's been a good push. He's been beating Randy Orton mercilessly on the past 2 weeks on SmackDown, as in on Raw this past Monday. So, and Randy Orton has done nothing, to somehow, rebound, try to get the upper hand on Mark Henry. So going into Night of Champions, you literally think, okay, Mark Henry's going to get this. Because why? Because what Mark Henry has done to Randy has been more believable than what Christian has done. Mark Henry has become a legitimate threat, or looks like a possible legitimate threat to Randy Orton and his world championship reign. Now, I'm not saying give Mark Henry a championship reign that'll last until, WrestleMania. I'm not saying that at all. He may get a month reign, he may get 2 month reigns. But either way, I don't think, this push that Mark Henry's getting, I don't think it's really bad, and I'm not really turned off by it like a lot of people are. Now, I'm not the biggest Mark Henry fan in the world, but I give credit where credit's due. I try not to be like a wrestling fan who mopes and complains about any and everything that TNA, WWE, Ring of Honor, or any other type of wrestling show does. But I try to find the positive, in certain things. With TNA, so much crap is going on there. I can't find anything positive in that company other than like a Samoa Joe and AJ Styles or Christopher Daniels. But that's not the topic that I'm talking about here. But still, so I don't think this Mark Henry push thing is really all that bad, and I'm not trying to change anybody's opinions. If you think this is a good push that Mark Henry's going, that's great. If you don't like the idea of Mark Henry possibly being a world champion before, this year ends, then, hey, that's fine too. I'm not trying to change anyone's opinions or anything like that. I'm just giving my thoughts on, this push that he's been getting. And, yeah. And I mean, like I said, because of the believability of Mark Henry, like I said, say he does become world champion, and he has a reign, just say like 2 month reign or whatever, and he's just as dominant now as he would be as world champion. Just think to yourself, that could be a good storyline, because you'll say to yourself, okay, we have this huge 350-pound monster known as Mark Henry as the world heavyweight champion. He's taking out Big Show, Kane, Sheamus, Randy Orton, or whomever. Who the hell can stand up against this big, huge guy? You know what I mean? I think that would be a pretty interesting story, because I mean, you look at it, you have Mark Henry as just this unstoppable juggernaut heel, and it's like he's taking out all these guys and put them in what he so calls his Hall of Pain. So it's like, who are you going to have to go up against this guy and take the belt from him? I think that would make like an interesting storytelling for SmackDown. I think and like I said, it could be Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan can be the David to he can be the David and to the Goliath type of like story. Daniel Bryan can come in and he can cash in his money in the bank. Where Daniel Bryan can be like scrawny little guy who nobody ever thought would be a world champion or ever make it in WWE, but he cashes in his money in the bank on. Mark Henry, a guy who, like I said, has just been destroying everybody on the roster and nobody could beat him or take the title from him, but Daniel Bryan has. That I think something like that'll be pretty interesting. Although Bryan said he's going to cash in his money in the bank at WrestleMania next year, but we never know. With WWE, they can change their minds quickly. WrestleMania is still quite a long time away from here. So yes, this is just my thoughts and opinions. Like I said, I don't think Mark Henry's push is a bad idea, and if he becomes world champion, I don't think it'd be so bad of an idea. Now, I'm not saying that his match between Orton at Night of Champions, I have no doubt in my mind. I'm not going into that match expecting it to be a 4-star quality match, because Mark Henry's a 350-pound dude, and he doesn't have a lot of, moves in his arsenal, so I'm not expecting him to move like Samoa Joe or anything like that. So I'm not going into this match expecting it to be a 4-star quality match. But however, I think having Henry as just this unstoppable heel and being this unstoppable heel as the world champion, I think that could make for some pretty interesting storytelling, at least on the SmackDown brand. So let me know what you guys think and your opinions on it. Like I said, these are just my thoughts and insights on this whole Mark Henry push situation. I'm not trying to change anybody's mind or opinion. If you like it, great. If you don't, that's fine too. Let me know what you guys think. And one last thing, I just think his Mark Henry's push kind of reminds me of Vader a little bit from WCW back in the early 90s. When they had Vader being his unstoppable heel and how he became WCW champion and stuff like that. So I kind of see the similarities between the two, like that. And then that made some interesting storytelling. Again, I'm not the biggest Vader fan, big Van Vader fan, but still, it made some interesting storytelling. So let me know what you guys think. Peace.